Okay. Hi to everybody. This is Kim from Therapy Travelers, and we're really excited today. I'm excited myself. As you guys know, October is Mental Health Awareness Month. We don't take that lightly here at Therapy Travelers. You know, one of our core values is to do work well, to do work with true excellence, and we believe that part of that happens and a way that we do and live out of that is when we provide really great resources to our internal clinicians, to our clients, to those within our community. And we're doing that today. And we're doing that today. And we're actually doing that this entire month. So every Tuesday from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Dr. Joseph Armendariz, who is one of our clinicians who we have the privilege of working with us, has agreed, and I shouldn't say just agreed, has happily said yes to doing a 4-part series on behavioral therapy. And we had a few of our team members ask us, you know, who should participate in this type of training? And it should be anyone, any teacher, any clinician, any administrator that works with students, directly with students. And I know directly right now means over Zoom, but anybody that works with them, there's a lot of great tools that will come. So just to get us ready, if you can mute your line, that would be super helpful because we're going to give it over to Joseph, who is a school psychologist. We are proud of the work he continues to do. He is somebody that continues to learn himself. He continues to want to be ahead of the curve. He wants to know all the great research that's out there, and he continues to take the time to learn that and not just hear it, but take time to truly and fully understand it. So Dr. Armendariz, this is day one, or I should say number one of our 4-part series, and take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here today and be with all of you. I'm going to actually set up the presentation now and put it up here so everyone can see. So let me do that really quickly. All right. Give me 1 second, everybody. Okay. And all right, can everyone see this? It should be lots of really amazing colors up here. It says behavioral expectations, setting the stage, and weather of the day. Can I get some thumbs up from people out there? All right, thank you. I see thumbs up from a few participants. And just as a reminder to mute your mics, we will have a question and discussion section at the very end, and feel free to plug in some questions as we're going into our chat box. And we'll take a look at those at the end as well. So again, thank you, Kim, for the introduction. A little bit about myself, I'll explain that, but I want to jump into the outline really quickly here. So today we're going to discuss positive behavioral management. What are some of those key tenets within that? Behavioral expectations. So again, as adults, when we're working with kids in our jobs, we are expected to behave in certain ways, and we definitely expect children to behave in certain ways. So how do we help children do that as their brains are growing, as they're just learning all of this? And so we'll look at also the environment and how I like to think of it as setting the stage, and that's a movie reference. So, you know, there's actors and sets and props and all those fantastic things that we think about in the movies. And then our mood and behavioral self-regulation, as well as the mood and behavioral self-regulation of children, kind of think of that as the weather of the day. What does that look like in the classroom or even in your therapy? And then we'll have some conclusions and then just some questions and discussions. So where does this information come from? So as I progressed in my training, I actually worked quite a bit in my early years with young children, very early, infants and toddlers, all the way up to about 5 to 7, so middle childhood. And then I also did quite a bit of work with children with autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. As you can see in the bottom 2 left photos, these are from an intensive behavioral camp that I completed over the summer called the Summer Treatment Program in Miami, Florida. And that training there was 120 hours over 2 weeks. So again, this isn't going to be something we can pick up overnight and change the way we think about these things. It does take practice And most of you, this will be a review, but also continual practice, and maybe you can bring some of these ideas to others that you're mentoring. And then I also had quite a bit of experience working in clinic and hospital settings, so kids in partial or intensive medical psychiatric hospital settings. And then again, through my PhD program, reviewing and using evidence-based prevention and intervention curricula. All right. So when I was an undergrad and I learned about discipline, and the word always struck me as a very negative connotation. But when we actually look at the origin of discipline, discipline really comes from the Latin word, disciplina, instruction, or given. We're teaching something. So when we're providing discipline, we're definitely imparting some knowledge and helping the child grow. And so I think it's gotten a bad rap. So I think some of you might agree with me on that, but definitely discipline is something that is so powerful in a kid's life, and that we can be there to shape their progress and their outcomes. So positive discipline. And when we think about positive discipline, it's something that is, again, we're modeling and teaching these expected behaviors. So we, as the adults in the room and other students in the room, we're looking out for those positive behaviors. We're setting the tone, and we're definitely the ones helping kids learn that. So kids learn vicariously through those modeled behaviors. And why should we use it? Again, overall, this is going to be more bang for your buck. So again, majority of kids are really going to respond to this. I think a lot of us can recall there are times maybe we weren't so positive and modeling expected behaviors. Maybe our voice got a little too high. And that might have worked in that moment. But what the research is clear about is those types of discipline is really going to work in the moment. And it's not going to generalize across different settings, different places, and different times. So we really want to have more bang for the buck, set that kid up for the future, and really teach them about how to behave and give them that good discipline. For majority of kids from different backgrounds, it's going to work. The next training, we're going to discuss a little bit more about how to specify or really get down to some details about different populations. And then how do we make this change? Like I said, I've been at this for about 10 years. And so I really have had to think about my own upbringing. I'm from a Mexican-American family, and that discipline sometimes can look a little bit more of the negative, or they're focused on, why aren't you sitting down? Or it could be a little bit more of, the voice could be raised. But for me, in my practice, I had to really make that commitment to change. And I think all of you can do that too. And we can, and we should as professionals. So I urge you to do that. So right now, when you think about behavioral expectations, we always have to consider where the child is coming from. So like I discussed, I have a different background. All of you come from different backgrounds. All the children we work with have different backgrounds. And that's also including their age. So at each level of their stage of where they're developing, they're going to think differently. They're going to act differently. And so we have to remember that the brain is developing at certain times. So it's not fair to expect maybe a 2 or 3 year old to sit careful or sit in their chair the whole 20 minutes or something like that, because their brain is still developing. They won't be able to do that. So we want to make sure that the expectations are appropriate for the age and the cognitive level of a student. Social emotional maturity. So again, kids can range, as you all know, on this bell curve, so many different levels of social emotional maturity. Again, really take that into mind. And the next training, we're going to go through a little bit more specified interventions or different ways to target kids that might have this as very underdeveloped. But generally, this is going to be a tool that can work for most kids. So again, that positive discipline, those expectations that we're going to provide to children will definitely work for a majority of children. And so something I go back to, and this is a training that I received from Deborah Birdnick. She's called The Brain Lady down there at the bottom, thebrainlady.com. And one of the handouts she provided is very helpful in always thinking about, again, I learned this in school, and some of you may have already learned this too, but again, the the developmental age and the cognitive abilities of certain kids. We want to take that into consideration. Because if you're expecting a kid to do something that they can't really do at that time, then we might be setting them up for failure. So we really want to always have this in mind. So for example, we know at age 6, based on the research, that the attention span increases a little. They're aware of their settings a little bit more. They're going to be interacting with peers. And then first grade to early adolescence, they get a little bit more peer interactions. And they really can understand a little bit more about how others are feeling. When they get into adolescence, as many of you know, working with adolescents, maybe that it becomes a little bit more egocentric, and they might not be able to take or understand others' feelings, but they can do it. It just seems that they might not be able to. All right. So when we're working with children, I always have this in the back of my head, in my back pocket as well. And this comes from a fantastic curriculum called Conscious Discipline. And although it's training for young children, I believe it works for all children across the developmental stage of where they're at, because we really need to think about creating that eye contact. And what the research shows is the idea of mirror neurons ensure the moment someone sees an emotion on your face, they will at once sense the same feeling within themselves. So really that part of the brain that understands certain feelings will light up and activate. So just by smiling at a kid or even showing different types of encouragement, that part of their brain is activated, and you're actually changing their neurochemistry, which is to me always like, whoa. And I kind of geek out about that. So, and that quote there is by Daniel Stern. The other piece is being present. I don't know how many of you have had friends or been around people that, you're just trying to communicate with them and they're on their phone, or they don't really seem fully present. And if you're having one of those days where you're not fully present, the kids pick up on that, and they might have, definitely thinking about certain backgrounds, certain kids might say, oh, they don't really care about me, or they might feel that way. So being present and enjoying the moment there is something super powerful for young children and all children. Touch, I know this is such a big thing in the education world that oftentimes we're not able to touch kiddos like pats on the shoulders in certain environments. So I urge you to always check with your districts. But as a professional and working with young kids, I always do the high fives. I give a pat on the back. A lot of the kids love dabs now, and even little dances. So it's a way for children to feel connected. We want the connections. We want the relationship to develop, and that's super important for kids. Also, the skin is the largest organ on our body, and that's a Jeopardy fact or a Jeopardy question there. And I love that idea that is taking in a lot of information that we really need to consider, and it helps children feel more safe and secure at all times. And then playfulness, so making it fun. When we make things fun in an environment, it's actually releasing dopamine, which is a powerful neurotransmitter that's helping increase the bonds and activation in their brain, so they're remembering the learning. So that's why it's gamification, or trying to make things into games. Children will often pick up on it better and can recall it better. Now, the other piece that I always have in so that connection's always in my right back pocket. This pyramid is always in my left back pocket. And this is a powerful curriculum called Incredible Years, and they have a teacher and a parent version. But it applies, and it's usually for young children, but it definitely applies again through the developmental stages. And here on the left-hand side of the pyramid are the benefits for children. And you can see that at the bottom there, if you can't really see it, make sure to turn up the brightness on your screen. But on the left-hand side, there's problem solving, cooperation, self-esteem is increasing. The next one up is social skills, then responsibility. And then at the top two, what we would want to decrease is non-disruptive behaviors, maybe a little bit of interruptions or getting out of their seats. And then at the very top are those really disruptive behaviors that we would want to decrease, maybe verbal aggression, physical aggression, or even destruction of property. And those are all going to be benefits here on the right side by using these skills and strategies. So at the base of your pyramid, where you want the solid infrastructure of your pyramid, so your pyramid is stable, is you're using all of these things at the bottom liberally. So, you know, empathy, you're connecting with the kids, you're giving lots of those good attention, you're playing, problem solving, talking through kids, the communication piece, right? Listening, and that's so important. Kids want to feel heard. They have a lot to say. I know most of you work with kids who just do not want to stop talking. And actually worked with a kid today while I was testing a kid for special education, had so many great comments. I had to have her use the parking lot to put a sign up and say, okay, any comment you want, you're going to put it in the parking lot for now, and then we'll come back to it because I do want to hear it. And then coaching. So think about if you've ever coached a sport or any coach that you've ever had in a sport, are they really paying attention to the positive things you're doing, giving lots of good praise, incentives, and celebrations? So we'll discuss that more in the next training, but definitely kids work off of that. Verbal incentives or verbal praise. So we're giving lots of that good love and affection towards children. The next part up is going to be clear limits and classroom structure, which we're going to review a lot today as well. But again, having those clear limits is really important. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation where you don't really understand the rules. Maybe if you go to a different country, even like cultural norms or expectations, that can feel uncomfortable. And so for a lot of our younger children who've never been to school, that is going to feel very, very uncomfortable to them. So they really need a lot of time to really practice that. Then at the top, closer to the top there, just going to put a reminder to mute, is a lot of these maybe nonverbal cues. So it could be just like this, just muting it and then praising. Thank you for muting your mic there. Once they do that. And then a lot of these other maybe distractions. So you kind of see where a child might have some of those behaviors. So then you're kind of jumping in, and we will go through that as well. And at the very top, I'm going to leave that to the very last training to talk about these other timeout procedures. A lot of these factors, we want to use them sparingly. We don't want to be using them all the time. We need to evaluate if we are using them a lot of times. Because what happens is when we are using those a lot, our pyramid becomes shaky and it wobbles. And we need to get our base back. So we really got to evaluate and think about how can we be working more from this base of our pyramid, so we're increasing all of those beneficial things in students and using these things at the very top more sparingly. So those would be the loss of privileges, timeout, having to call a parent. That doesn't feel good for us either. I know when I have to talk to a parent about a student's behavior, it doesn't feel good to me as well. So as I was discussing, behavioral expectations, when we're in a situation we don't really understand what's the rules, what's my expectation, how do I behave, it's uncomfortable. So we need to think about how can we teach this to children. If they're younger, we definitely want to review this a lot more when they were coming into our classrooms or our therapy sessions. And they might not be a lot of rules at first, and we want to just go through those throughout the day or even through transitions is a good time to do that. But we're practicing this quite a bit. So we have to think about if they don't understand it, if they haven't learned it, we can't expect them to follow through with it. That is just not fair to a kid. And so again, that's so important. And I really want everyone to take that home with you today. And then hierarchy, not all behaviors are created equal. So we really think about certain behaviors that really have to be attended to. So anything that could be unsafe for a child or unsafe for somebody else, we really have to address that immediately. And those are things we will discuss. But there might be things that you can ignore. And we do that all the time. And then once we see a child is back on task, then we would want to praise that behavior. And on the right here are some little bit of tools here that, again, we'll discuss as we're going through the training. But having these visuals here is super important. I want to preview that. But also positively wording the expectations is something that we have to do for kiddos. We want to ask them we want to put the rule out there and expectation that this is what we want them to do. It is also not a bad idea, and it's good practice to have rules for different situations. So there might be rules that you're working on with kiddos, just therapy structure, or even transition from the classroom to your therapy room. And you might review those 2 rules. So the first rule up there as you see at the top, is an example of this. So maybe that's the number 1 rule that's across every environment. Be respectful. The next one would be follow directions. Work quietly. Might be something in the classroom. Use your materials and possessions appropriately. We would often call that use your stuff right, especially for younger kids. Remain in your area. Raise your hand is a rule that many classrooms have. Then look, listen, and pay attention. So there's different ways, again, and maybe in the computer room, or if you're having a computer activity, you might have a rule that's structured, stay on your page, things, be respectful with our computers, and definitely stay in your area might be one of those as well. The one thing that I always really enjoy working with the rules and expectations is doing some type of hand signals or even nonverbal cues that can help children remember that, or even have a nonverbal reminder that they need to be following certain expectations. So for the rules on the right-hand side, one way to do that would be respectful, follow directions, work quietly, use your stuff right, remain in your area. So you're giving them, it's a little bit of that flight attendant. So you're telling them to stay in their area, raise your hand. So you already have that. Then look, listen, and pay attention. So that way, younger kids or even older kids, they might just see that if you see them talking, that they could, oh, I need to work quietly. And so you don't even have to use a verbal redirection and maybe interrupt other kiddos. You can just have them get back on track by using that expectation. So if you haven't tried these, I would definitely recommend that you do this. It's super important that kids have this in their life. And you're there again, structuring that for them. And it almost becomes that little reminder in the back of their head or in their mind. They're like, wow, I got that here. And so it continually gets easier for them as they're moving forward. And then another way to think about rules is having these picture cue cards or something that can alert them that when you're teaching all of this. Again, as teachers, we use picture cards, we use visuals, and that at the top, you can show them, this is expected, you can choose that, this is expected, and then maybe something that isn't not expected. Because we want to give kids a way to choose the behaviors in a way that's going to be safe. And when they're choosing something that's not safe, we got to have them understand the difference between the two. And so that's why it's really helpful to have these in picture form for kiddos, and that you're also, again, positively wording these. You're showing that they may walk in the group, they might walk with a friend. All of those things are going to be things that we want them to do and keep practicing it and review it. So even if you're leaving the therapy room as you're exiting, you might just say, be respectful, use your walking feet, and stay in your line. So you're just giving those transitional rules for the kiddos as well. So let's practice this. So what do you say for creating a rule for young children who keep getting out of their seats or leaving their assigned area? So let's practice it. So these are the rule options that you might incorporate into your classroom or your therapy. So stop leaving your area, stay in your assigned area, or don't leave your area, or let's just say none of the above is the last one. So if you guessed, or if you said B, that would be correct. So you want to have kids, they're staying in their area, stay in their assigned area. Again, the other two are pretty easy to spot that you're wording it in a stop or a don't. You want to give kids the expected behavior and what we would like them to see. The hallway rules, so walking feet, stop running, go slowly, or none of the above. So A is the correct answer here. So we want walking feet. That's expected behavior. What do we want them to do? Walking feet. Then ready for therapy rules. Sit down, look, listen, and pay attention. Stay in your area, or none of the above. So this one might be 2 answers. So think about it really quickly. Okay. So look, listen, and pay attention. And that's one we discussed earlier. Stay in your area. So you have them thinking about, this is my area. You've already practiced that. Why would sit down not be one? And you might have some clever kids. "Well, I'm going to sit down over here. Um, Not in my chair, but I'm going to sit somewhere else." That's the rule. You don't even want to go there. So you want to say, you already taught them the area that you would say, look, listen, and pay attention. Those are going to be our expectations in therapy. So again, that's super important to do this and to have it very specific as well. All right, I'm going to just take a few seconds here to think about where we've come from. So again, that platform of where we're thinking of and working with young children is based on these expectations that they're positively stated. You're modeling this, you're teaching this to young children, and you have a philosophy there. You have a base to your pyramid that you're working from. And now setting the stage is something else that really is something you can commit to changing your approach and how you think about your environment and where you're working at. And I love to think about this as a movie reference. So we have the stage. So that could be your therapy room. That's your classroom. We have on the right, we have all our props, the things we use in our classroom to teach. Other fun things, maybe you have a disguise or a costume that helps the kids be more immersed, or you're using puppets. And then down here on the left, you have a director, which is you, and also the assistants that are working there. So you might have paraprofessionals working with you. And I always thought that was a fun one right here with the Titanic, because you know, the door, the whole thing about the door wasn't big enough, or was big enough for both of them. But sorry, I don't want to get too sidetracked there. So this is it. So you have your stage, you have your prop, and you have the people that are working with you, and all of this works together. And this can be another teacher for you, and it's very powerful to have these components in your back pocket. And what we call the environment is always antecedent control. So antecedent control, and most of you have heard the term ABCs of behavior. If you attended the last behavioral training or from your other trainings, we describe antecedent of the behavior, B is for behavior, and then the C is the consequence or the outcome. But right now we're talking about antecedent control, and that is your environment. One way to set your environment up is to think about, if I have an open space up here, so if you see the picture at the very up at the top, that's a big open space. So what if a lot of your kids in class or your therapy room continue to run across it? And that becomes a source of a problem that you have to always talk to the kids about this or teach that rule consistently. What you may think about doing, and if it's possible, is how can I restructure my environment to create some more boundaries for children? And this is helpful for us as adults too. And it's almost like that idea of interior design, and that you can actually think about, how am I going to set up my environment to make it the best optimal way for me to learn, to remind me to maybe take my breaks. You know, as adults, we have those little reminders in our environment. So for children, it's very powerful as well. Scanning your environment. So every time I work with a kid, I always look around my environment. If there are a pair of scissors in the environment, I'm going to remove those. If it's not an activity where we're practicing using scissors, or if it's something that I wouldn't want a child to touch at that time, I'm going to remove it and put it out of sight. So out of sight, out of mind. And make sure to lock your cupboards if you can. Those will really prevent the type of behaviors you really don't want to have to address. Again, you're setting up an environment for students to be successful, and that you can spend more time on praising good behaviors and praising their work and their effort. And then teach about the environment. So when you go into a classroom as a young kid, or even as an adult, when you're back in college, you know, it's nice to know about the environment, know about the campus and the school. So some of the kids you work with, you might do a first activity as, let's learn about the therapy space. Let's learn about the campus if you don't know it already. Those things go a long way and making the rules more meaningful for the kids. Another thing I don't have on here, and I will make sure to put it in the notes, is if you can have kids build in their own rules, and if it's appropriate, that's definitely something that I would recommend. And it works really well with younger children. And I always think about it too, as you communicate more about what you don't say or leave for discovery, and it's potential mistaken behavior. So conspicuous teaching. So being very, very explicit in your teaching skills. Don't leave it up to something that they can make up in their mind. You want to say, this is our space that we use for this, and in continually teaching that rule. Because then if the kid thinks it's more of a play space, they're going to continue to do that. So your environment is another teacher that we can use throughout our day. So that having that intention and checking it. So I would, like I said, like a child and try to set that stage for success. And one way to do this is to work with your team and have a checklist, or even thinking about different parts of your environment. And this one here is something that you can definitely look online for, and I will also provide this in the resources. It's something that you can say, well, is my environment set up for learning? You have to really think about that, because again, your environment is your teacher, another teacher that you can use. And we are very overworked, understaffed. So we really have to think about how can we make this beneficial for us and for the kids that we're teaching. And if you're, as an individual therapist in your office, again, check this out and look at how you're structuring things throughout the day. It's very, very beneficial. Now, like in the movies, they have a schedule. We have to stay on schedule, right? So that is something that in education we have this as well. One way to do this is to have those visual pieces integrated. And I really always have this picture here on the left, that's the belt. And those are picture icons that you can have for kids that you can kind of see. Maybe this is for a population that is maybe less verbal, but that's always nice to have on the go. And some of you on the right, as you can see, that might be more visual in the classroom and set up there. It's always nice to have those visuals there. The one in the middle here is the one I used in Florida, and that we had everything scheduled out for. These were kids with intensive behavioral needs. The kids knew exactly every transition. We went over the rules. And it's not a bad idea if you're working with kids who have really intense behavioral needs to have a really good structure, and that they're continually practicing these routines and knowing the schedule throughout the day. And this one is one of my favorite charts. 9 reasons to use visuals. I share this with teachers all the time. I often ask them, I'm like, have you tried this visual with kiddos? Visuals work for everybody. Again, it's a good reminder. I use my Google Calendar a lot. We're teaching cause and effect with these. We're helping the brain develop more reasoning skills, and they may reduce some anxiety there. So I think visuals are very underused. We need to continue to use them in ways that can be helpful, and going and referring back to them consistently throughout the day. The next one, if you're not familiar with this works for us, this works for children. This is called the Pomodoro technique. When we break up activities into smaller, manageable parts, we are effective. If we can sit down with the kid, or we can sit down ourselves and work for 20 minutes and just focus all of our attention, our energy on that one technique for 20 minutes, we'll have a better outcome. And this, for young children and children and adolescents, is really helpful. We wouldn't want a kiddo working on something for an hour, 2 hours. That's just too long. So you have to, if they are, you would want to have them break it up into more manageable parts. And one example comes from Conscious Discipline here. I'm just going to remind for a mute. Here is Lorena in 5th grade. So the way her day is broken up is into 20-minute blocks. And at the very beginning, the morning routine, maybe this might be for an individual schedule, is that kiddos has their start activity, the warm up, then they engage in that first activity for 10 to 20 minutes, then they get a little bit of a break. Then they jump into that second activity, then they get another little break, and then they jump into their next activity, and then they get another little break, and then they complete the last activity. And some of you might say, wow, that just seems like a lot of work. However, if it's a kid that is still learning these expectations and they can't manage their behaviors yet, by breaking this up, you're allowing them to work up to being able to spend more time in an activity. And then you might be decreasing the chance that they engage in mistaken behaviors. So you're actually saving yourself time, and you're actually saving yourself a lot of stress, because they're going to be engaged, they're going to have fun with this, and they'll be able to complete product and work for you as well. And then the Pomodoro tomato timer there, if you have that visual there, that might be a nice reminder for them and yourself to kind of engage in those smaller, manageable sections for kids. All right, so I just want to stop here and have everyone just take a deep breath with me really quickly. So let's, everybody, in through your nose. Let it out through your mouth. So the weather of the day. And the reason why I started with the deep breath there is because the weather of the day is not always talking about the kids that we work with. The weather of the day is talking about how we manage our own selves and how we're presenting with kids. Because remember, we're a model for a kid in their lives, and we want to be teaching them expected behaviors, and that comes from us as well. So we have to be able to manage our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors so that kids can pick up on that, and they're there and be like, wow, I can do that one day. So when we first meet a kid, what is the tone that we're setting? Oftentimes when we work with kids, are you getting down to their level? Are you able to connect with them? And like I said, looking at their eyes, how's your body language? Are you really closed up? Are you tensed up? You know, again, those are things that we have to pay attention to. Those all go into that daily forecast of when we meet a kid or when we're working with a kid. What's the tone of your voice? Is it very terse? Are you're very short with kids? Or super loud? You're thinking about all of those in tonal structure, or the tonal structures of how you're communicating with kids is very important. And how do you feel when you enter a chaotic space? I know for me, if I enter a space where it feels there's a lot of tension, the weather of that day or the weather of that room, it doesn't feel as good, and it probably won't be as conducive for learning or even the generalization of learning principles for that kiddo. So we want to create more better weather days than there are bad weather days. And one way to do that is to think about this. So I'm running out of pockets, but as I said, I put those other things in my back pockets. So this one goes in my top pocket here. And this one is thinking about filling up a piggy bank. But these are the things that you're doing on a consistent basis. All those behavioral praises, the expectations, and how you're modeling your interactions in that base of the pyramid, you're filling up their piggy bank. Because some days you might have to make that withdrawal. We're all human. There are going to be some bad weather days. And then you may have lost your cool, or you may have raised your voice a little bit, but you've only taken out a little bit of a withdrawal. Because remember, that piggy bank is already filled up with a lot of that good praise, a lot of that good interaction with kiddos. So you're making a withdrawal. Now think about when there's nothing to take from that piggy bank. If the kids never had a positive environment and they're not getting it in that setting that they're working with you, if you're continually pulling out, it's going to be a negative. Your bank account's going to be overdrawn. That kid's bank account is overdrawn in a sense, and there's nothing to pull from. And that's when that pyramid becomes top, or turned on its top, and that it becomes very, very shaky. So that's something to think about always when you're working with kids. And how do we do all this? So it really comes down to taking care of ourselves, because it sets the tone for how we're working with children. And as humans, as adults, we have to fill up our piggy bank. And how do we do this? So take a few seconds here, just write down a few things that you think about, that you do, or keep those in mind. Always think about, how do you take time for yourself? How do you continually fill up your piggy bank or fill up your cup to be able to give back to others? And this has been proven quite a bit in the trauma literature. When working with children and adults, maybe who have experienced trauma, this works, although it's been for kids with trauma and adults with trauma, it works for everybody. So the basic needs that we have to take care of, and as adults, and when we're working with kids, making sure that we're getting enough sleep, at least 7 hours, 8 hours. A lot of you are like, I don't get that. Try to work on it. It's something that's a continual practice, because sleep is going to be so powerful in how we work with, regulate ourselves, how we can keep going and showing and modeling that expected behavior. Eating, fueling our body is so important for us. Keeping that good nutrition is also another important part to working with children. Exercise. A lot of you already get your steps in from going from the classroom to the back to your office. I know not right now because we're doing a lot of Zoom, but thinking about ways to get out and get your steps is going to keep us moving and filling up our cup to be able to give back and model those expected behaviors. The other 3 set of needs, so those connections and relationships that we have with our family, our friends, our connections online, however that is, and you're making those connections, is proven in the research that's so helpful for us in regulating ourselves. And it's about quality. It's not the quantity. So we don't need a lot of friends. We just need those few quality interactions, reach out to each other, take care of each other as colleagues, and be able to, to really support each other. Mindfulness, spirituality, and religion are also other things that we can practice to help ourselves regulate and to be in the moment and be fully present with a child, and what you're doing. Your therapy can be more effective in the long run. There are times we might need therapy or counseling, and this is something that you should think about as within your own employment. There's oftentimes, we have a employee assistance program that we can reach out to, and because even as a therapist in the DSM, I know in the education system, we don't work that from the DSM, but there's such thing as vicarious trauma, or things that we see or hear from children that can really affect us deep down. That could be a diagnosis of vicarious trauma and being affected in a way that really can make your work not as productive. Let's practice a few techniques. I'll go through, I see our time. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. So our body scans is something that I learned doing therapy, working with young children and adolescents. So just checking in with yourself. And you can do this now. You can do this and practice it more throughout the day. So how are my feet? Go start at your bottom at your feet. How are my feet feeling? Is there a lot of tension there? And work your way up. Is there a lot of tension in my stomach? How about my shoulders? That's one place I carry a lot of stress. So I try to make sure to relax those. And how is my neck? How's my head? How is my face presenting? So all those things, we want to do a body scan, check in with ourselves. Mindfulness practice, something that you can do a lot with kids. Every time I do a mindfulness practice with the kid, I'm actually doing it as well. These are things that we can do all the time to keep working on our self-regulation and with children as well. Progressive muscle relaxation is another tool that can help children and yourself as a therapist relax and to release maybe some of those. After you did your body scan, you see you have a lot of tension in your shoulders. So what you can do is you can raise your shoulders up, hold it, take a deep breath in, hold it, and you let it go. So you have released a lot of that tension, and you're able to tell your body, it's okay, we're gonna move forward. And you release a lot of that tension there that might be building up. Positive coping strategies, we all need these. And that's something I use all the time when I'm working. This child is not giving me a hard time. They're going through a hard time. Their brain's still developing. Maybe they come from a home environment that's not very loving and caring. So they're going through a hard time. They're not trying to get on your nerves, and they're not having a vendetta to get at you in a way that may seem hurtful to you. In the end, everything's okay. So if something's not okay, it's not the end. We still have another day. We can come back to this. Just keep swimming, the famous Finding Nemo statement there. And what are your positive coping statements? How do you keep going throughout the day? How do you keep filling up your cup to be able to move forward in a way that's going to be powerful for children? And as educators, we work as a team. We are building something that's awesome. We have to look out for each other. And that's why you're here today. You're learning all these things. And I really hope that you've put some of these things in your pockets and take them when you're working with kids and share this with others. I really hope that you can provide this training to other people in a sense of if you're mentoring people, and how we can take care of ourselves and take care of others is very important, because we really can't pour from that empty cup. So just as a review, we went through some behavioral positive management techniques. They work for everybody primarily. What are the expectations? They have to be learned. They have to be reviewed. You have to set time for that, or their children are not gonna, it's not fair. It wouldn't be fair for kids. The environment, we have that as a tool we can always use and put things away. It's, sometimes if the environment is too cluttered, if there's not a lot of defined spaces, that can be really tough for kids to learn in. Our mood and behavioral self-regulation. Let's take care of ourselves so we can take care of others. That's the number one golden rule I think about, and work on that every day. It's those 6 areas that we discussed. I'm not perfect at it, and I'm still learning all the time. And there are some fantastic apps, and I'll definitely share some of those resources with all of you. And I'll put those in the Google Drive for all of us to have. So how can we be there for, that's me as a little kindergartner with my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt. How can we be there for the little Josephs and future Dr. Armendariz? Because I had a lot of people that helped shape my life, and people that were meaningful in my life to be able to make this difference. So how do we get people, how do we work with kids and make a true difference? So thank you very much. I was really very happy to do this today. I want to go through some questions now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see this box and look at how many great people we have here today. All right, awesome. Kim, that was the presentation there. I want to take time here to have some questions.
Yeah, that's great. You guys, if you want to put your questions in the chat box for Dr. Armendariz, and then he can answer. And there's no silly questions. Any and all are welcome.
All right. I think there was a way to raise your hand as well.
I did see that Ashley Hayes asked, where is that checklist from? There's a checklist you provided kind of halfway through.
Yeah, and that was the one that I forgot to leave the source off of, but it will be in the Google Drive, and I'll make sure to put the source there on the slides, but it will be in the Google Drive so people can reference that. Let me make a note of that. Yes, those checklists, the checklist also can be found through a quick Google search. I think it's fantastic because oftentimes we don't think of the environment and have a checklist that's like, did I forget that? And maybe you're moving into a new house. You might be that type A person that's has a checklist for everything, but it's the same with our classrooms. We really have to be thoughtful about that. Okay. All right, any other questions?
Okay.
If anyone wants to unmute their mic and actually communicate directly, that's fine too.
So I do see the question, do we get a certificate for this? We will provide a certificate of this behavioral training at the end of the 4-part series. So that is something we can provide and send those out to you guys. It's not for CEU credit. It's just a certificate, yeah, sharing that you participated. And there's a question here, Dr. Armendariz, will they receive a copy of this presentation? I know you talked about this a bit at the beginning. If you want to provide a little bit of insight, if anybody missed that.
Yeah, so what I'm planning to do is put this presentation as well as the other resources into a Google Drive. And what I have done too, and I want to share this with everybody, as I went through this presentation and developing it, a lot of you have a lot of resources that you already use in your life. And what I was able to do is definitely create different sections for all of these. My library of resources. So really think about how you set up your resources is very important, because I have so many great things that I want to use. And if I don't have them front and center, I won't use them. And so that's why I really wanted this training to be a place where you can have these resources that you might be able to pull from. But it's also, this training is a philosophy. You're committing to changing the way you think about how you present, and also how you structure the environment for kids, and using those great visuals for kids and practicing all of that is a commitment. And it takes a little bit more work up front, but for the long run, it pays off. Well, thank you, Brian. And there's a lot of other people sending me great messages here, some privately as well. So I appreciate everybody's attention today. And I think this is a topic that we have to continue to work at. You know, we don't learn it in a day. We learn it throughout our process of working with kids. And there are going to be different kids that really need it more, right? That they need more structure. They need the more love and affection from us. So.
Well, thank you. Oh, did you get another question come through? Oh.
You asked how we access the Google Drive. I will set that up and send that. We can send that as a link to everybody. Right, Kim?
You got it. Well, what we can do, I'm trying to think what would probably be the best way of doing this, because I don't have everybody's email address, is if you would like a copy of the presentation, send me an email. Here is my, if you look in the chat box, there is my email address. And so just send me an email and say, I'd love a copy of the presentation, and I'll make sure you're added to the Google Drive or the Google Doc, the folder. But thanks everybody for participating. Again, this will happen next Tuesday with more information from Dr. Armendariz, and it will happen for the next 3 Tuesdays, and we're all focused on behavioral training. So thanks again, and it will be available on our website. This recording will be available on our website starting tomorrow. So there we go.
And a preview of next training, we're really going to dive into those redirections, the statements that we use with kids, effective commands. Because anytime we use a command with the kid, we have to be very specific with that. And we also want to use those sparingly. Because one thing that I want to put in everybody's brains, kids don't have a lot of rights, and unfortunately, right? So they're getting commands all the time from adults. So that's a little preview, and I'm really excited to share this and get back to everybody here. And I really want everyone to come with a lot more questions next time too. It's gonna be great.
All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.